You're listening to Scaling Up Services, where we speak with entrepreneurs, authors, business experts, and thought leaders to give you the knowledge and insights you need to scale your service-based business faster and easier. And now, here is your host, business coach Bruce Eckfeldt.
Are you a CEO looking to scale your company faster and easier? Check out Thrive Roundtable. Thrive combines a moderated peer group mastermind, expert one-on-one coaching, access to proven growth tools, and a 24/7 support community. Created by Inc. award-winning CEO and certified scaling up business coach Bruce Eckfeldt, Thrive will help you grow your business more quickly and with less drama. For details on the program, visit eckfeldt.com/thrive. That's ECKFELDT.com/thrive.
Welcome, everyone. This is Scaling Up Services. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. And our guest today is Jessica Rhodes, and she is founder and co-owner of Interview Connections. And we're going to talk a little bit about podcasting. We're going to talk about how to scale your business through thought leadership and getting your ideas out there into the market. With that, Jessica, welcome to the program.
Hey, Bruce. Thanks so much for having me on your show today.
So it's always fun to have someone else that's in the podcasting world on the podcast. But why don't we start with a little bit of your background? So before you got into this business, what were you doing? What was your professional background and what led to this business?
So my professional background, before I became an entrepreneur and started my business, I was in nonprofit. So I was working at a nonprofit called Clean Water Action, directing their door-to-door field canvas. That was like my college job. And then I just kind of moved up the ranks in that organization. As I, graduated college, I became a director. So that was my background. I studied communication in college. So I remember I took one PR class, I took some media classes. So it kind of is convenient that I ended up having a business in this industry, but it wasn't necessarily the plan because when I, as it never is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
when I had been with the nonprofit for about 6 years, I was, I had just gotten married. I got pregnant with my first child, and there's a shift. If you have kids, there's a shift that happens, and I wanted to be home. I didn't want to be working long hours and making not a lot of money with a new baby. So I left that job, and my dad is an entrepreneur. He's a business coach. He has an online business. So he introduced me to the world of online business, and I started a virtual assistant company, which basically means I was a freelancer with about 3 clients. That was the very, very beginning. I was working from home with my baby. And as things were growing, one of the services that I was providing to my clients was podcast booking. It was something that my dad, as one of my first clients, wanted me to do for him. And then I started doing that for some other clients. And that's really around that time. And it's like early 2013, I kind of got bit by that entrepreneur bug. And I'm like, all right, I don't just want to be invoicing for the hours I'm working because then I just have a job. I want to really build a business. I want to scale a business. So, which is why I love your show and why I reached out to you is because I'm like, oh, I totally get this because I had and have a service business. And the question always is, how can I scale this? How can I make more money, but not just work more hours? And that was the shift again in starting my current business, Interview Connections. I launched Interview Connections in fall of 2013. And we've grown a lot since then. Yeah,
congratulations. I mean, I think that it's a fascinating and every story is kind of unique. And I think the model or the pattern, I see again and again, which is, someone's doing a job or someone's providing some kind of service, and it's usually a generalized service that involves kind of many tasks and many facets, but they see some piece of it that they realize has some meat and has some ability to kind of grow. And the question is, how do they do that? And how do they make that into something that they can kind of do exclusively or more focused and create a business around it? So, I think it's a great way to start a service company. And services are kind of have that cutting edge or that double-edged sword to them where they're kind of easy to start. It's easy to kind of hang up a shingle, put together an LLC and say that you're going to focus on this thing, but they can be kind of tougher to build. And oftentimes because it's, you now have to find find people and you kind of have to staff up. I mean, I guess how narrowly or how did you go about kind of figuring out that this, booking service was going to be something that you can scale? And what have you learned about how narrow or wide that is, or what types of booking you do, or what kind of booking you don't do? I mean, how have you defined that service as you kind of have grown the company?
Yeah. So being really really niching down and being specific about what we do and what we don't do has definitely been one of the big keys to our success, because there's so many things that we can do. And over the years, people always say, like, why don't you do this? It's so similar. Yeah. But I think the more you dilute a service business, the harder it is to really market it and know who your ideal client is and really optimize and increase the quality of the service. So we started the business actually serving just podcast hosts. So podcasters hired us to find their guests. And, at the time, I remember the first program was like the book it and promote it. We would find your guests, schedule them. We would create a graphic so they could share it. Like there was this whole bunch of stuff. And over the years, we kind of just, as we scaled up, we kind of simplified the service. So we added in a service where we get people booked on other shows. And that's actually our core service now, based on just the demand in the marketplace. Yeah. More people want to be booked on other shows as a guest. Podcast hosts don't have as much trouble finding guests, because you probably have so many people coming to you to be on your show. You don't really need to pay someone to find people, unless, of course, like we have some clients who interview really unique people that aren't pitching them. So we help them find those interesting, unique types of guests. But yeah, so we kind of shifted as the industry grew and evolved. We kind of changed our model to really focus more on getting people booked on other shows. And for a while, we would help with scheduling the recording. And we made a shift a couple of years ago where we said, okay, we're not going to actually schedule the recording. Once we have the booking, we hand it off to the client, because then we turn into an assistant. Then we turn into an executive assistant, which is not the service that we specialize in. We specialize in, finding podcasts, pitching podcasts. That's totally different from managing someone's schedule. Yeah. So that was a key thing that we did in order to scale, is know what we're good at and what we're not good at.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great example, and it's something I'm always telling clients that I'm working with in terms of how to scale the business, is the faster you want to scale, the more you need to focus, like the more narrow and specific you need to make it, because it has to do with, how well you can market it, how well you can sell it, how well you can operationalize it, the talent that you need to develop, the training, the manuals. Like the more niche you are, the easier all that stuff is. But I don't know if it's counterintuitive. It's difficult for an earlier stage company to say no to a lot of things. I guess what did you, in kind of retrospect and reflecting back on this, what were some of the challenges, or what are some examples of things that it was difficult to say no to in the beginning? And what was it about? Was it about money, or is kind of what you thought you were doing? And once you said no to it, what did it allow you to do?
Yeah. So it's funny because I'm remembering, like, years ago, I would have on the website this like long list of, like the comparison check marks, which are great for like, SaaS businesses. Yeah. Like, here are all the features of these different levels. And I remember having that, like, if you get this level, and I would list like as many possible things just to make it look like a lot.
We'll have food ordered and delivered to your show if you're hungry.
Because I thought that people wanted more stuff, and the more ways I could explain, like, we're going to do all this stuff. And what I to answer your question, what I had to say no to was just cutting out a lot of that stuff and really just saying yes to the one service that we do and that we excel at, which is connecting people for interviews, finding the right shows, doing that strategy work in the beginning. And so then, kind of more recently within the last year or so, people would ask us will you schedule my recordings, or will you create my landing page? Like, no, we're not an executive assistant. No, we're not a website design company. So saying no to that stuff, it is a little scary, because you think, well, somebody wants to pay me for this, but ultimately, like, that's not what we do. Yeah. So by saying no to that, it opens up the door, because the time, and we kind of did this evaluation with our coach, we looked at, okay, even if we could charge somebody way more money to schedule the recordings, that time is taken away from maybe 5 clients that would pay just as much for the bookings, because that's what they actually want. That's what our ideal client actually wants. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a good one. I think if you look at it as a local optimization, if you look at it as well, I could just do this one more service for this client, it's tough to see it. But if you realize that I only have so much time and energy, where am I best applying this? it becomes easier to kind of see the rationale for focusing on the thing that you're great at and the thing that you can excel at to make even more money on. And
absolutely.
if you're chasing the next dollar, it's hard.
Yeah.
So in terms of, it sounds like you made a couple shift over this time period. Were those easy, hard decisions? I guess, I find a lot of these kind of strategic pivots and things end up being kind of logical and obvious in retrospect. but
totally.
At the time, what was when did you first sort of see opportunities for kind of shifting some of these things? And then what was the decision-making process like around that?
Yeah, so yes, they were definitely difficult decisions to make, difficult choices to make. In retrospect, it's like, oh, okay, it's easy. And they get easier as we go because the longer we're in business, the more success we have, the less those individual choices and decisions seem like such a big deal. Yeah. And that's something like our mastermind group has really helped us with. Just little choices where we agonize over and they're like, this isn't a big deal, just to decide and move on. And so we've gotten a lot better at it. But they, especially in the first 5 years, which we're going into year 6, these decisions are difficult because you're like, is this going to make or break my business? Especially when you have what seems to be a really great client say, hey, I want you to do this. I want to work with you if you can do this. Yeah. It's like, oh, good. You don't want to turn away business, but then you turn around and you have twice as many people over here saying, oh no, I don't need all that stuff. I just need this. So yes, they are difficult decisions in the moment, but in hindsight, it just reassures you, you have to go with your gut and really just exactly know what your service is best at, know what your company is best at, and really, really focus on that.
Yeah. And I think it is. As you get bigger, as you grow, as you become more successful, you've made more and more decisions. I think it's you can see it, but you see it easier. Oh, I'm in one of those situations again. I see what I should do.
Exactly.
It's not the first time that you're kind of facing that. So you mentioned a couple of things in there that I wanted to kind of hear how they came about or how you chose to do them. So you mentioned a coach, you mentioned mastermind groups. What are some of these kind of external programs, structures? I think a lot of people who found companies or kind of find themselves, owning a service-based business, run a service-based business. They're very internally focused. How have you, I guess, what have you investigated in terms of ways in which to help yourself grow and be strategic and work on the business, not in the business? What has worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? What have you experienced?
Yeah. So, definitely getting out of the business as much as possible, literally as much as you can, has been super key for us. So for the first several years, we definitely went to a lot of industry conferences just to build the exposure and to let people know what we do because, this is a new industry. Podcasting is a new industry. We were the first podcast booking agency. So literally for the first couple of years, we didn't have any competitors. So we were just making sure people knew about us. And then once that caught on, once more people starting businesses like this, the word started spreading, more people are finding us on Google. So now we're thinking, okay, now it's not just about exposure, but it's about how can we optimize and stand apart and make our service unique so it doesn't just look so we don't just we're not commoditized and people don't just price shop around. So then we started to get outside of our industry and I joined, my business partner and we joined Allie Brown's Premier Group, which is a group of women, female entrepreneurs. The average revenue in the group is well over 7 figures and from all different industries. So in the group, we're the only people in the group, in the podcasting industry, there's people in all different industries. Yeah. And so it's super valuable to get insight and coaching and advice from people in successful businesses outside of our industry. So that has been really, really important.
Let's just chat about that one a second, because I think that's something that comes up a lot. I see a lot of, leaders, founders, entrepreneurs who are kind of figuring out how to get insight and so say they're a managed service provider and, they want to go network with the managed service provider that is, twice as big as they are now or 10 times as big as they are now, because they feel like that's going to be the best source of information. And I do find that there is a lot of insight to be developed and gained from people that are in other industries. And I guess what are some of the ahas that you've had in terms of masterminding with folks that are not in your immediate industry, and what's kind of the perspective, or what are some of the takeaways that you've been able to get from those folks?
So one of the biggest things has been by getting outside of our industry, it really reminds me how stuff that seems really obvious to me is not obvious to people who aren't in my industry. And people will just say like, well, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like something simple. Like, how do I know like how many downloads I have? Like something that if you're literally in the podcasting industry, you have a podcast, you do this all day long, you would never think to write a blog post about that because you're like, this is so basic. But then I remember I get in the room of really successful people. They're just not in my industry. Yeah. And I remember, oh, what's so obvious and basic to me is actually really high value information to this person over here who would be a fantastic client. So that is really probably one of the most valuable aspects of masterminding with people outside my industry is just getting in the mindsets and the heads of ideal clients for me, but not necessarily people in the same kind of business. Yeah,
that's a good one because I think we get very in our own soup, and if we're in that for too long, that becomes the norm, and we forget what the rest of the world is like.
Oh, totally. The other thing is branding too.
Okay.
Because this was something that our coach, Allie, really helped us with is when I started working with her about 2 or 3 years ago, she helped me rebrand and really attract a higher level like clientele, business owners that are doing, over 7 figures. And it's just as simple as how I'm communicating when I'm doing literally like the colors and the fonts of the logo, how the website looks, all of that stuff I wasn't really thinking about it. I was doing the service. I was operating the business and just having her go to the website and kind of give me her first reactions and like how things looked and how things were communicated really, really helped because, you look around in your industry and everyone kind of looks the same. So you think, oh, well, I'm kind of in line with everyone else,
exactly.
But that's the problem. You're in line with everyone else. So now like literally I've had so many people that say, oh, your website just stood out. It was so different. So again, getting someone outside the industry at a higher level, look at it and kind of help you differentiate is so important and has been so valuable.
Yeah. I think that's a big one is we start comparing ourselves to the competitors rather than thinking about what is our target, what is our prospect seeing and what impact do we want to make on them? And sometimes we want to be different. I mean, sometimes we want to make sure that we're positioned right so they understand a certain product or service, but we also need to differentiate from our competitors so that the customer gets why they should hire us or what kind of customer should hire us. Good. I'm guessing within that kind of learning too, particularly as you're going to higher value customers, that there was some pricing factors in there. Tell me a little bit about pricing, how you kind of approach pricing, how you've changed your thinking around pricing, both kind of mechanically and also from a mindset point of view. Like what was the evolution there?
Oh my gosh. So when we first
always an issue. This is why I always know this one's going to come up.
I know it's good. So for several years, it was all month to month pricing. And, the prices went up. When I first started, our prices were like, $47 a month, $77. We had a couple different levels and then just kind of continued to go up. Okay. Then we were $197 a month, $297, like every $100 we would raise our prices. And it really reached a point where we would just have to sign on so many new monthly clients to continue to scale and grow. So we made a shift about a year or so ago, maybe a year and a half ago. We focused more on selling packages. So instead of signing on monthly retainers, monthly packages, we sold packages of bookings. So, we're a podcast booking agency. For a long time, people would pay, a certain amount per month for a certain number of bookings per month. Then we kind of shifted to selling like 15 bookings for X amount or 24 or 30 bookings. So people would invest in a whole package. And the mindset, number one, cash wise, it's been a lot better to get like $5,000, $8,000, $10,000 per sale than $497, $997.
Yeah.
So that's number one. That is really great for cash flow wise. But the mindset shift was we were now signing up clients that were prepared to commit to the strategy for 15 bookings, which ends up being 4 to 5 months. So we were attracting people who were just more confident in the strategy. They were people that were ready to commit, because so many people that signed up for a month to month were like, their mindset is, I'm going to try this for a month or two and see if I like it. And yeah, I mean, you could do a really great job and have people stay for a long time, but it was just rolling the dice every time. So now we sign up, when you raise your prices like that and you then focus on selling $5,000+ packages, you're going to close less deals because not as many people are going to pay that. But the quality of the client has skyrocketed. Like we are working with multi-7 and 8-figure companies, people that they still look at the price of $5,000 like, oh yeah, that's like a drop in the bucket. I'm like, yeah, that's the kind of client you want.
Yeah, you want to be a drop in the bucket.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's been a big shift. And then even just recently, just a few months ago, we took the monthly option off the rate card. And I might offer it to someone by invitation if it seems like Makes sense. Really what they need. Yeah. But changing that has been really important for our business.
Well, that's a good one, because I think that a lot of people get worried when we talk about target customer or pricing, where we say, this is what we're going to go out with, or this is what we're going to focus on. They say, oh, well, but that's going to really filter down my prospect pool, or that's going to really limit the number of people I can work with. That's good in that we're really going to concentrate your focus customer. But the other thing is, you can always offer it to other people. I mean, it doesn't mean that we're not going to do business with someone who's not in that target customer. It just means from a strategy and a mindset and a messaging point of view, that's what we want to focus on. And we'll have some peripheral business around that, and we can take it. But the more that we can concentrate, the better. I think so many people end up just chasing money. Just any customer they can get that's willing to buy something, ends up diluting them, and it makes it more difficult to scale the business.
Oh yeah.
Good. So we talked about pricing a little bit. I guess what else have you learned in terms of thinking strategically about the business rather than working in the business? What are either sort of tools or strategies, techniques that you've used to help really kind of think about how you're approaching the business and what you can do better in terms of being able to grow and scale it?
Yeah. So a big thing that we haven't talked about yet is just the team structure. So this was a really big shift when I started the business. For the first several years, I grew a team of virtual contractors. I mean, I was at home with a baby, so I couldn't imagine in the first couple of years having employees. But as we grew in 2017, I made the shift to, I got rid of all of our virtual contractors and I started hiring in-house employees, got an office, was all on site. And so we're currently a team of 12 on-site employees. And as we grew the team, creating different positions. So within the business, we have people specialized and focused on certain responsibilities. So, we've got our booking agents. We have a full-time employee who does all the show research, finding the shows. We have a manager who can really help us with the on-site, team stuff. And I brought on a business partner. I kind of glossed over that, but I started the business on my own. And in 2018, my first employee became co-owner. And so then she's chief of operations. I do all the sales and the marketing. And then we have a team, a manager. And so by building the team and having different people in leadership really spearhead certain parts of the business, that has been really, really critical, because I think when you dilute any one person's role too much, and this is advice that we got from somebody in our mastermind group, Kelly Rhodes, she's an expert in team stuff. And we were starting to actually have our manager do a lot of different things, because we were like, this is great. We got somebody in leadership. We're going to have him do all this stuff. And she's like, whoa. You don't want to dilute your manager too much. And I think that can be said for any person that you have in your staff. If you dilute someone too much, they can't focus and really excel at the thing that they're best at.
Yeah. I think it's one of the dynamics that happens as a company scales, is that people become, more and more specialized, and the roles become more specialized. The processes become more kind of defined. I guess for you as, someone who went from kind of starting the company and kind of doing it all to now pretty focused in their role. I mean, even at the leadership level, now sort of dividing up the operations from sales. I guess, how did you go about figuring out what you wanted to do, what parts you're best at, what you were kind of excited and energized by, how did, finding the people to kind of take over those pieces, how did, that process of actually handing over? Tell us a little bit about how that's worked for you personally.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could say there was always a clear system in place.
I had this plan and I just executed the plan perfectly.
So it's interesting. A lot of it, I'll talk, first about having a manager, because when we hired a manager, that was a really big step. To hire an employee, a full-time employee who doesn't actually do any booking work, we're like, oh my gosh, like that was an investment in adding somebody to the leadership team just to oversee everything and help us there. Yeah. So we kind of shot and then misfired a couple times with that. So a couple of years ago, we did hire a manager, and our idea was, okay, she was going to have a full booking load and she was going to manage. Again, made the mistake of we diluted her way too much and didn't really know what we needed at the time. So, I mean, that was the first thing is we hired a manager way too soon and realized, oh gosh, we don't need this. We can actually empower a lot of our current employees to take on some more responsibility, pay them a little bit more, and we don't need a full employee to do all this stuff. But then we got to a point where it was time. The other advice that we got from our coach was, she said, just keep your eye out, because when you find the perfect person, you're going to want to find a place for them. Yeah. And so we interviewed Matt, our manager. We interviewed him a couple of years ago. It was May, I guess, 2018. And he was great. And we offered him the job, and he accepted, and then he didn't accept because he goes, you know what?
Unaccepted.
Because he had been in a job for a really long time, was super loyal. He goes, I don't want to leave them high and dry. I need to replace myself. And we're like, oh my gosh, he's so loyal. We're like, now we want to
no, more.
We were like, he's so perfect.
Now you need to put him in sales.
So we kept in touch with him, and we kept interviewing for other positions, and we just kept thinking like he was such a great candidate and we really see him here. So we kept in touch with him, and later that fall, I just reached out. I'm like, hey, let's have a cup of coffee. Let's check in about where you're at. Cause I know he was still looking for a career change, and just the timing worked out. So that was really, really critical, is like keeping an eye on candidates that you interview who are a really good fit. And it's just like buyers buy your service when they're ready to, not when you want them to. And the right job applicants will come on board when the time is right, not necessarily always when you want them to, or when they might want to be hired when you're not hiring. So by keeping in touch with Matt, it worked out really well. And then he ended up coming on board in December, and it was just, there were a couple things happening. We had an interesting project opportunity that came to us that we said, okay, if we bring Matt on, we'll have the bandwidth to do this. So anyway, that's sort of the long story.
It's a good, I think, takeaway for folks. And this is something I tell all of my kind of senior leaders, is that they need to have a list of people that they would like to hire. And, always be searching for talent, and always having, ideas for people who would make good fits in the organization before they need the people. Because if you start looking for talent when you need the talent, that's painful, and it takes months, or you're having to pay recruiters lots of money. So always be on the lookout for, people who are a good cultural fit, who have skills that you're going to need in the coming months and years. And then you can go to them. And when you have the open position, when you actually have the need, you can reach out to the, hopefully half a dozen people who you've been kind of thinking about, and hopefully one or two of them will actually be available at that time or be interested at that time. Because it's a timing issue. Oh,
absolutely. And the other thing that I love to do is always having a current organizational chart and an organizational chart for 6 months out and a year out. Because we always want to just see how is that spider web going to keep growing. Right now we have Margie and I, we have Matt, we have our booking agents, and we're looking at, okay, we'll create a team lead position, and we're just looking at how it will grow. So that way, when all of a sudden everyone's plates are super full and we don't have bandwidth and everyone's super busy, we have a plan in place to how we're going to expand. What roles are we going to create? So I find that stuff super fun, is to look at, okay, what is the business going to look like in a year from now, and not just be surprised by it, but have a plan on how to get there.
That's great. I actually have an article coming out on Inc. on this. I call it why every organization should have 2 org charts.
Ooh,
and it's the current one. Yeah. Well, I'll figure out when the published date is, but it's why every organization should have the current one, which is the map to everyone in terms of who is responsible for what, and who is, what the coordination points are and stuff. And then the one that I'm working towards, which is the next level of the organization that I've designed, that I'm building towards and making sort of strategic moves and finding the right talent. So kudos. I think that's a great concept to have in mind as you're building the organization.
I love that. Yeah. And that's something that, we're having Matt focus on being a manager. And so we're looking at, okay, when are we going to bring on a salesperson? So that's like another exciting thing, is like just looking at the different positions that you're going to create. It's, as you can see, we geek out about this stuff. This is fun.
Well, and it's future focused work. I mean, you're creating things. I mean, that's a fun part of being an entrepreneur.
I actually remember being on an airplane because I was at a conference when I decided to have employees. And I just remember being on an airplane, like flying home or flying to a conference and writing out my organizational chart. And I remember being like, I am literally creating jobs right now. Like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. You know, and the one thing about airplanes now that I find disappointing is now we have Wi-Fi in airplanes, and I don't have the time to think. You know, now people actually expect me to respond to emails.
How soon can we get the Wi-Fi?
Oh, yeah. Can we have Wi-Fi problems, please? Can you like turn it off so I can explain to people that I couldn't have Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your business and the customers. Who are you focused on at this point, and what are the services you're providing them?
So we have a few main kinds of clients that we work best with. Coaches and consultants are great for us. Service business owners, so digital agency owners, are fantastic. And then real estate investor / real estate investor coaches. Those are sort of our main three kinds of clients that we work with. And we book them for interviews on leading podcasts in their niche. It's a great way for them to get exposure for what they do and to, like we said before, differentiate themselves from their competitors. Because with a service business, a lot of times people, your prospective clients will start to commoditize you. They'll just like review all the different websites, see what they like. But when they hear a podcast interview with the founder, the CEO, the chief marketing officer, it will immediately set you apart, and people will feel drawn to you. They'll feel like they have a closer connection to your company and what you do. And so it really sells high-end clients a lot easier.
Yeah. And we know you don't actually provide the scheduling.
You will schedule your own interviews, but we will find the shows, connect you with the host, and take all of that work off. And then you can find the time on your calendar. And a lot of our clients, like I said, we're working with multi-7-figure businesses. They already have assistants.
Yeah.
So
there are people in place to figure that stuff out. Awesome. And if people want to find out more about the services and about you, what's the best place to get that information?
Sure. Interviewconnections.com is where you can learn more about us. We have a blog. And if you're thinking about doing this, you can fill out a form. We can hop on a no pressure call to just learn more about what you do. And again, that's at interviewconnections.com.
Great. Thank you. I will make sure that those are in the URL is in the show notes so people can click through and get that information. Jessica, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Bruce. It was super fun.
You've been listening to Scaling Up Services with business coach Bruce Eckfeldt. To find a full list of podcast episodes, download the tools and worksheets, and access other great content, visit the website at scalingupservices.com. And don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter at scalingupservices.com/newsletter.